A shoeshine boy was plying his trade in New York's Grand Central Station. A silver medal dangled at his neck as he slapped the shine cloth again and again across the man's shoes. "Sonny," said the man curiously, "what's the hardware around your neck?" He said, "It's a medal of the mother of Jesus." "Why her medal? She's no different from your mother." The boy said, "Could be, but there's a real big difference between her son and me." The boy's devotion to Mary, the mother of Jesus, invites me to ask, what role does Mary play in my life? How might she play an even bigger role in my life? Today's feast of Mary, the Mother of God, is the oldest Marian feast in the church. This feast is as much a feast about Jesus as it is about Mary. And the reason is because this came to be from a bishop whose name was Nestorius back in the 4th century. He was saying that Mary was not the mother of God, but rather the mother of the man, Jesus. But you see, if you don't say that Mary is the mother of God, then you are saying that Jesus is not God. That can't be done. So, at the Council of Ephesus, in the year 431, Mary was defined dogmatically as Mother of God. So for us, we honor her, we respect her, we love her, we seek her intercession by praying, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners." So we honor her primarily because God honored her by choosing her to become the mother of his divine Son when he took on our flesh and became a man. Now, if God himself chooses to honor Mary in this way, should we not do the same? And what could happen if we do honor her and turn to her in our need? Well, let me give you some examples of how this plays out in real life. A dear friend of mine back in my previous parish, he died just before COVID at the age of 99. He was on Normandy Beach on D-Day. And he always questioned why he did not get killed along with all the others that he was with when they landed on Normandy Beach. And he recalled to me how just 2 weeks prior to the battle, a Redemptorist priest had come and given a retreat, and he gave the men the brown scapular to wear. My friend chose to wear it, and he had always prayed his rosary. And he said it was only by Mary's intercession that he survived in the bloodied waters while all the men around him were killed. Another parishioner of mine back in Thomas prayed the rosary daily. And he told me the story of how one day he was driving up the mountain from Parsons to Thomas. Now, those of you who have never been in that area don't really probably can't visualize what that was like. But it's like a pretty treacherous road to go between Parsons and Thomas, where the two parishes were. And right about in the middle, well, almost in the middle, there's like a 90-degree turn that you have to make. It's called Wild Maggie. And it's pretty wild because, you're going 55 miles an hour and you just got to slow down to 20 miles an hour to make this turn. So he was driving that trip on the mountain, as many people do every day. He had a car that he was driving. He had it for 5 years. And when he bought the car, he put a beautiful little statue of the Blessed Mother right on the dashboard. He permanently mounted it there. But this particular day, as he drove up the mountain, he watched just as he was coming up on this sharp, wild Maggie turn, and the statue began to shake. And then it fell off the dashboard and fell onto the floor. 5 years it had been there. He saw no cars coming, so he bent down to pick it up. As he did, he pulled the steering wheel and he went off the road onto the berm. When he looked back up, he saw that there was a carnival truck coming at record speeds with flames coming out the back of the wheels because the guy's brakes were on fire and he couldn't stop. He couldn't slow down. And he was in the wrong lane. And this guy would have been hit head on had he not gone off into the berm. There was a guy who was devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary, faithfully prayed his rosary daily. His whole world was tanking. He had lost his business. He couldn't find a job. His wife was on the verge of divorcing him. Nothing was going right. But he persevered, praying his rosary, going to daily Mass. It was on the feast of Mary, the Mother of God, that he was in church, praying. Everyone had left, and he silently was asking the Lord, why? Why all these problems? Why is it all happening? Lord, Mother Mary, come to my rescue. No one was in the church, so he thought. All of a sudden, he felt a tap on his shoulder, and some strange lady says, all those problems that you asked about, those are God's answer to your prayers. And she turned around and walked away. He thought, God has a strange way of answering my prayers. Anyway, about a month goes by, and it was the beginning of Lent. And he had been praying and going to daily Mass. So one night, around the dinner table, he had 5 children. He asked what his kids were going to do for Lent. They told him what they were going to do, give up chocolate, do this, do that. He didn't even want to broach the subject with his wife because his wife was becoming very antagonistic towards the church, towards his praying, towards his going to Mass. Everything about the church she was becoming very antagonistic about. So he just avoided the subject with her. So she says to him, aren't you going to ask me? And he says, uh-oh. He said, okay, well, what did you plan to do for Lent? She said, I'm going to go to daily Mass because I see a joy in you, even though we have so many troubles, so many problems, everything's wrong, and I still see this joy in you, and I have to try and see if I could have some of that joy myself. So she went to Mass every day that Lent. He prayed for her. And then at the end of Lent, she went to confession for the first time since her first confession. A lot more details to the story. But the long story short, their lives began to change. The rosary became the center of their life. Everything started to get better for them. So jump ahead a few years. Their oldest daughter went to Notre Dame. Brilliant girl. She was going to go into medicine. But her father was so concerned that she might walk away from the faith that she had so embraced. So he prayed like crazily that Mother Mary would take care of her and protect her, keep her faithful. So her first day at Notre Dame, she knelt praying before the Blessed Sacrament. Out of nowhere, this girl comes up and puts a note on her backpack that said, "Would you like to join a prayer group we are starting? It's called the Children of Mary." So she, with 5 other students, started this prayer group. They prayed the rosary every day. 4 years later, when she graduated, there were 300 people, students, praying the rosary daily, going to Mass. During her 4 years at college, she was proposed to 3 times, 3 different times while at Notre Dame. None of those guys seemed to be the right one for her. All 3 of those guys entered seminary to become priests. This same daughter went to study in Austria. One day she called her father and she said, "Dad, I met this guy." And her father says, "Oh no, somebody in Europe, how am I going to see this? What's going on? How am I going to approve of this guy?" He was really worried. So he said, "Describe somebody he reminds you of so I can get an idea of who this guy is." She said, "Dad, he reminds me of Pope John Paul II. The father says, "I guess you got me on that one." Come to find out, this young man was a Byzantine Catholic seminarian. He was studying to be a priest in Slovakia. She, who was proposed to 3 times, ends up marrying a seminarian who became a priest in the Byzantine Catholic Church, and they now have 2 children. This same father tells the story about his son. This kid was a rugby player, big, tough dude, drank lots of beer, always in trouble. And the father tried every kind of punishment to tame his son. Nothing seemed to work. So the father continued to pray to the Blessed Mother, "Take care of my son." The son went to Notre Dame. He got involved in the Rosary prayer group that his sister had started. Then he went on a retreat shortly into the first semester of his freshman year. The Dominican sisters, the Mother of the Eucharist, were giving the retreat. The nun that was giving one of the talks said to the students, "Some of you know that God is calling you and you are not answering." The boy walked out, called his father, and said, "Don't renew my tuition for the next year. I know that I'm supposed to be a priest." You can imagine this father thinking, "Who are you and what have you done with my son?" Anyway, again, skipping a lot of details. 8 years later, he was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Sacramento, California. Mary, she's a great mother. Every prayer is answered, not in the way we want necessarily, not in the time we want necessarily, but in a way that is better than we want. Because Mother knows best.